Welcome to our tranquil space, a place designed to help you find the deepest, most complete sleep. All your thoughts, all your worries just for now, let them rest outside the door. Now find a truly comfortable position. Slowly feel each part of your body letting go and gently sinking deeper into the soft mattress. Relax your forehead, relax your shoulders, relax your mind. Tonight, we won't use philosophy to think. We'll use it to let go. You don't need to try to understand or remember anything at all. Simply listen. Allow this voice to wash over you like a gentle stream of water, softly soothing your mind. And finally, take a long, deep breath in, and as you exhale, breathe out ever so slowly. Let us drift into sleep together. And as we drift, as we let go, we find our minds gently resting on a single, simple, human question. It is not a question to be solved or worried over. It is just a sound, a gentle stream to listen to as we fall. The question is, can human beings truly place themselves in another person's perspective? Can human beings truly place themselves in another person's perspective? This is the central, anxious question of our modern, disconnected age. We are told, in our deeply fractured and lonely world, that empathy is the highest virtue. It is the social cure-all. In our corporate retreats, our classrooms, and our increasingly bitter online arguments, the solution proposed is always the same. You just need to see it from their point of view. We have become obsessed with the idea of walking a mile in another person's shoes. We try, with all our intellectual might, to imagine what it is like to be them, to climb inside their head, to map their experiences onto our own. This act of perspective-taking is the core of our modern empathy project. We consume media that promises to show us the other side. We engage in complex thought experiments. We believe that if we can just gather enough data, enough facts, enough personal testimony, we can successfully reconstruct another person's consciousness inside our own. But this is the paradox, this very act, this desperate, solitary attempt to see from another's perspective often fails. And it fails in a way that can make us feel more isolated, not less. Why does it fail? Because at its root, it is a solitary act. It is me, sitting here, in my own head, using my imagination, my experiences, and my emotional toolkit to try and build a simulation of you. The entire process is still, fundamentally, all about me. It's an act of intellectual colonization, not genuine connection. We other the very person we are trying to understand. We turn them into a problem to be solved, a puzzle to be figured out, a set of experiences to be cataloged. In this mode, the other person is not a person at all. They are an object of our empathy, a specimen we are studying. This is what leads to that familiar, frustrating, and deeply lonely feeling of being misunderstood. How many times have we felt this ourselves? Someone says, "I understand what you're going to," and we can feel that they don't. We can feel that they are not connecting with us, but with their own flawed, internal projection of us. They have not truly met us. They have just put a label on us. This is the failure of the empathy project as it is so often practiced. We are like scientists with microscopes, trying to analyze a cell, when what we truly crave is a handshake. This modern obsession with empathy as a psychological cure-all is a surprisingly recent historical phenomenon. The English word empathy was only imported in the early 20th century, around 1909 by psychologists like Edward Titchener. It was a deliberate translation of the German philosophical term Einfühlung, which literally means feeling into. But feeling into, this is the crucial, little-known detail. The term Einfühlung was first popularized in 1873 by the German philosopher Robert Vischer. And he wasn't talking about feeling into other people. He was talking about feeling into art. He was describing the aesthetic experience of how a person might project their own feelings and sense of bodily space onto a painting or a sculpture. How we feel the lines and curves of a statue as if it were our own body. Our modern, far more ambitious idea that we can feel into the vast, hidden, and complex inner mind of another human being is a much more radical and perhaps more arrogant leap. So, we are left in this lonely bind. We try to perspective take, and we fail. The person we are trying to connect with remains an object, a thing we are studying. What if this entire project is flawed? What if the goal isn't to place ourselves in another person's perspective at all? What if that's a solitary, intellectual dead end? What if there is another way to connect? A way that is not about seeing from another's point of view, but about standing with them, a way that is not about imagination, but about presence. This is the radical and deeply comforting alternative proposed by our guide for this journey, the philosopher Martin Buber. Buber, a man who lived through the most fractured and violent century in human history, looked at this modern loneliness and diagnosed its root cause. He argued that we have forgotten how to have a real encounter. We have become masters of experiencing and using the world, but we have forgotten how to meet it. His entire philosophy is a desperate, poetic plea for us to relearn this lost art, to move from a world of objects to a world of relation. To understand this, we must first understand the man who made dialogue a sacred and cosmic act. Section 2. Martin Buber was born in 1878 in Vienna, the very heart of a restless intellectual and increasingly anxious modern world. This is a crucial historical fact. He was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, and his intellectual cradle was a city obsessed with the self. It was a world that was inventing new ways to probe, analyze, and dissect the individual psyche. The air was thick with questions of my neuroses, my past, my inner life. It was, in short, the birthplace of the very empathy project we struggle with today, the idea that the human being is a deep, dark, complex object that must be figured out from the outside. Buber was a product of this world, but his entire life's work would become a powerful, poetic rebellion against it. He is, to put it simply, the philosopher of meeting. He looked at this modern obsession with the self and saw it as the root of our deepest loneliness. He saw us all becoming lonely specialists in our own autobiographies, while forgetting how to have a simple, direct, and real encounter with another human being. He wasn't interested in what happens inside a person's perspective. He was obsessed with what happens between them. His central diagnosis is that we have become so skilled at analyzing the world that we have forgotten how to address it. We have been trained, he argued, to live almost exclusively in a world of objects. We experience, we categorize, we analyze, we use. We look at a tree and we classify it species, age, value as lumber. We look at a person and we do the same: age, social class, political alignment, usefulness to my project, threat to my ego. This, he would later argue, is the default mode of modern human existence. It is a world of using. It is a world of it. Buber's entire philosophy is a plea to recognize that there is another, completely different, and far more essential way to live. This is the world of thou. This is a world not of experiencing, but of relating. It is the world of the encounter. In an encounter, Buber argued, the other person is not an object in your world, a thing to be figured out or empathized with. They are a presence that you meet, and in that meeting, you are both changed. You do not see from their perspective. You stand with them in a shared moment, and the reality of that meeting itself becomes the most important thing. This distinction between a world of objects and a world of presence, between it and thou, would become his life's work. It was not an abstract, academic puzzle for him. It was a deeply personal, almost agonizing quest, born from a profound, formative experience of his own. Here is the rare and often unspoken detail at the very root of his life when Martin Buber was just 3 years old. His mother, Adele, abandoned the family. She left him and his father, and for all practical purposes, vanished from his life. He would not see her again for over 30 years. This primal, broken meeting was a wound at the center of his being. He was raised by his father and, more significantly, by his grandparents in Lemberg. But this early, unexplained loss, this experience of a thou who suddenly and completely became an it, an object of memory, an absence, a story, haunted him. His lifelong, passionate, almost mystical search for the nature of a true, healing, and present encounter can be seen as a lifelong attempt to understand and heal that first, devastating failure of relation. He was not just a philosopher of the I-thou. He was a child who had known the profound, silent trauma of the I-it in the most intimate way possible. Because of this, Buber's philosophy feels different. He is not a system builder like Kant, creating intricate logical maps of the mind. He is a poet, a mystic, a storyteller. His most famous and important book, Ich und Du, I and Thou, published in 1923, is not a dry academic argument. It is a slim, lyrical, and intensely passionate poem written in a style that is more like a holy scripture than a philosophical treatise. It is not designed to be analyzed, it is designed to be encountered. Buber's quest, then, is to save us from our loneliness by reorienting our entire conception of reality. He wants us to stop seeing connection as an act of psychological perspective-taking, that lonely, intellectual I trying to feel into an it. He wants us to see that true connection is a dialogue, a mutual, present, and total meeting where, for a fleeting, holy moment, there is no I and no it, but only the sacred, living in between. To follow his path, we must first go deeper into that world we all know so well, the default, functional, and deeply lonely world he called I-it. Action 3. To understand Martin Buber's profound answer to our loneliness, we must first honestly and clearly diagnose our condition. He does this by introducing what he calls the two primary words, Grundworte. These are not single words, but word pairs, and they represent the two fundamental and completely different ways we can exist in the world. The first, and by far the most common, is the primary word ich in German, ichs. This, Buber argues, is our default setting. It is the world we are born into, the world we are trained by our schools to master, and the world that our modern, technological, and scientific society values above all else. What is the world of ich? It is the world of experience, Erfahrung, and using benutzen. In this mode, the I is the center of the universe. The I is the subject, the thinker, the feeler, the one who experiences, and everything and everyone else becomes an it, an object. An it is a thing to be perceived, analyzed, categorized, measured, and, ultimately, used. It is a thing that exists for me. This is how we navigate almost our entire day. The coffee cup on the desk is an it. We perceive its boundaries, its function, its usefulness for holding liquid. The tree outside the window is an it. We classify it oak, approximately 50 feet tall, needs pruning. Even in our interactions with other people, we are almost always in the I-it mode. The clerk at the store is an it, a functionary to process our transaction. The driver in the next car is an it, an obstacle. Even our friends and family, much of the time, are its. We analyze them. He is in a bad mood. I should avoid this topic. She is a useful contact for my career. What can this person do for me? This is the very essence of the perspective-taking project we discussed. When we sit down to empathize with someone, we are often engaging in a highly sophisticated I-it operation. We are treating them as a complex, fascinating it. We gather data. What is their socioeconomic background? What is their political affiliation? What past traumas define them? We analyze this data with our intellect, in our own minds, to build a simulation of them. We have figured them out. We have turned them into an object of our understanding, a thing that now exists neatly inside our own world. We have experienced them. But, Buber would say, we have not met them. It is crucial to understand that Buber does not say the I-it world is evil. In fact, he is clear that it is absolutely necessary. We cannot survive without it. This is the world of order, of science, of cause and effect, of commerce, and of civilization itself. A doctor must treat the patient, at times, as an it, a collection of symptoms to be analyzed, a body to be repaired. A general must see the battlefield as an it, a map of forces to be deployed. We must be able to categorize and use the world, or we would all perish. This functional necessity was the air Buber breathed. This is a key historical fact. Buber was developing his philosophy in Vienna and Berlin at the absolute zenith of European scientific positivism. This was the age of the Vienna Circle, a time when the dominant intellectual belief was that the only true knowledge was scientific, empirical, and verifiable. In this view, if you couldn't measure, test, and quantify something, it was, quite literally, meaningless. The I-it mode was not just a way of knowing, it was being crowned as the only way of knowing. The problem, Buber saw, was not that the I-it world exists. The problem is that we have become trapped in it. We have come to believe it is the only world. We have become kings of a kingdom of objects, and as a result, we are desperately lonely. We are masters of using, but we have forgotten how to relate. And here is a rare, illuminating detail. Buber's own academic training put him right in this paradox. His 1904 doctoral dissertation was not on dialogue, but on the history of mysticism, specifically the works of Nicholas of Cusa and Jakob Boehme. He was, from the very beginning, fascinated by experiences that went beyond the empirical, that claimed a total, unmediated meeting with reality. But, as a doctoral candidate, he was forced to use the tools of the academy, the I-it tools of historical analysis, textual criticism, and categorization to figure out and explain these very mystics. He was a man using the language of it to describe a thou, and he knew, better than anyone, that something essential was being lost in the translation. The I-it world, for all its necessity and power, is a fundamentally lonely place. The I of I-it is a solitary, detached observer. It is a world of monologues. It is safe. It is orderly. It is predictable. But it is a world without genuine connection. It is a world where we are, at best, analyzing other people's perspectives from the safe, sterile distance of our own. To truly cure our loneliness, Buber insists, we must be willing to take a terrifying, total, and transformative step. We must risk leaving the safe harbor of I-it and entering the sacred, unpredictable, and all-encompassing world of I-thou. Section 4. If the I-it world is our default, necessary, and lonely reality, the second primary word is our liberation. It is I-thou in German, ich du. This is not just a different mode of experience. It is a different universe of being. It is the world of Relation Beziehung. And Buber is clear. Relation is the opposite of experience. You do not experience a thou. You meet a thou. In this mode, the other is not an it, not an object to be analyzed, categorized, or figured out. The other is a thou, a whole, present, sacred, and active presence that comes to meet you. This is the most crucial and most difficult part of Buber's philosophy. When you are in an I-thou encounter, the other person is not a collection of parts. You are not thinking. This is Jane, a 40-year-old lawyer, a Democrat, who is currently sad. That is all the language of I-it, of analysis and objectification. In the I-thou moment, you are simply and totally with thou. All the parts, all the labels, all the history, all the data dissolve into the single, overwhelming, and all-encompassing presence of the being before you. You are not observing, you are participating. And just as the thou is different, the I of I-thou is a completely different I. The I of I-it is a detached subject, an observer, a consumer of experiences. But Buber says the I of I-thou is an I that is spoken with one's whole being. You cannot hold anything back. You cannot be a detached analyst and be in an I-thou relation at the same time. You must bring all of yourself to the meeting. You must be present, vulnerable, and open. The I-it relationship is safe because you are always in control, the detached observer. The I-thou relationship is a terrifying risk because it requires you to give up that control, to be fully present, and to be willing to be changed by the encounter. This, then, is Buber's radical answer to our question. Can we place ourselves in another person's perspective? Buber says this is the wrong question. It is an I-it question. It is an intellectual, lonely project. In the I-thou encounter, the question of perspective vanishes. I am not trying to see from your point of view, and you are not trying to see from mine. Instead, we are standing together in a shared, sacred space, in a moment of pure, mutual, and direct meeting. The reality is not in me or in you. It is between us. This relation, Buber insists, is reciprocity. A thou is not a passive object of my empathy. A thou meets me just as I meet it. A tree, an animal, and most profoundly, another human can address me as a thou. This is a two-way street. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. And in that dialogue, for a fleeting, holy moment, our profound, cosmic loneliness is cured. In the I-thou relation, we are not alone. We are with, we are home. This is a state that cannot be willed, and it cannot last. We cannot live in the I-thou world. It is, by its very nature, a fleeting moment of grace. Every thou we encounter, Buber says, must, inevitably, fall back into being an it. The friend I just had a profound, soul-to-soul meeting with becomes, an hour later, an it, a name on my phone, a person I need to remember to buy a birthday gift for. We must return to the world of I-it to survive, to plan, to organize our lives. But Buber's point is that a life lived only in I-it, a life without the memory and the possibility of I-thou, is not a human life at all. It is the life of a lonely, functional object among other objects. This is the key historical fact. Buber's short, poetic masterpiece, Ich und du, I and thou, was published in 1923. It was not a conventional academic text, and it was not an immediate bestseller. It was a strange, lyrical, almost scriptural book that emerged in the intellectual and spiritual vacuum of post-World War I Germany. And here is the rare, related detail. Buber wrote the book in a state of intense, white-hot inspiration. He felt, much like a prophet, that the ideas were being given to him, that he was transcribing a truth rather than inventing one. He would later say, "I did not compose it. I was written." This is why the book reads like a poem or a revelation. It is not an argument for I-thou. It is an attempt to be an I-thou, to address the reader as a thou and call them into this world of relation. This is why Buber's philosophy is so radical. He is not giving us a new technique for empathy. He is telling us to abandon that I-it project altogether. He is calling us to have the courage to stop experiencing each other and to start meeting each other. To understand how these two worlds form the rhythm of our entire existence, we must look closer at the fundamental grammar of our reality. These two ways of being, I-it and I-thou, are what Martin Buber calls the primary words, Grundworte. This is a crucial concept. He doesn't just mean they are words we say. He means they are the stances we take. They are the fundamental word pairs that speak our existence, that create the very reality we inhabit. Our entire life, Buber argues, is a constant, restless, and often unconscious flickering back and forth between these two primary words, these two worlds. The first, and most important, distinction to grasp is that the I in I-it is a completely different I from the I in I-thou. On the surface, it seems like the same I, just with a different object. But Buber says no. The I of I-it is the individual. It is the I as a subject, an observer, an experiencer. This is the I of modern psychology, the I that we try to perspective take with our callback to the Lonely Empathy Project. This I stands apart from the world, looks at it, and says, "What is that? What can it do for me? How can I analyze it?" It is an I that defines itself by its separation from the world. It is the I of the scientist, the I of the consumer, the I of the lonely man in a crowd. But the I of I-thou is not the individual. It is the person. This I does not pre-exist the encounter. It comes into being in the moment of relation. It is an I that is spoken with one's whole being. It is not an observer. It is a participant. It does not stand apart. It stands with. This I is not defined by its separation, but by its connection. When this I meets a thou, it becomes a true person, whole, present, and engaged. We can be an individual all alone, but we can only become a person in relation. From this flow, the two different worlds. The world of I-it is the world of experience, Erfahrung. This is the world of objects. It is the world that exists in space and time. It is a world we can measure, chart, and organize. It is the world of cause and effect, of if I do this, that will happen. This world is reliable. It is functional. And, as we've said, it is absolutely necessary for survival. It is the world of our calendars, our jobs, our laws, and our sciences. But it is a world that is, by its nature, in the past. The moment you experience something, Buber argues, it is already over. The I has processed it, categorized it, and filed it away. It has become a dead object of your memory, a life lived only in this world, no matter how rich in experiences, is a life of profound, echoing loneliness. The world of I-thou is the world of relation Beziehung. This is the world of presence. It does not exist in the measurable grid of space and time. It is the immediate, sacred, and unmeasurable present moment. This world has no cause and no goal. You do not enter into an I-thou relation in order to get something that would be I-it. You enter it, or rather, it happens to you as an act of grace. It is a world of pure, unmediated, and reciprocal meeting. It is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and, by its nature, fleeting. It is the thou who inevitably must become an it again. But it is in these fleeting moments. Buber insists that all real living occurs. This is a key historical fact. Buber was not alone in this radical dialogical turn. He was part of a small but profound wave of German Jewish thinkers reacting against the cold, isolated I of 19th century German philosophy. At almost the exact same time, thinkers like Franz Rosenzweig and, even more strikingly, a lesser-known philosopher named Ferdinand Ebner were independently developing very similar philosophies. Ebner, in his 1921 book, The Word and the Spiritual Realities, argued that the I only discovers its own existence when it is spoken to by a thou. This dialogical school was a desperate collective attempt to find a new basis for humanity, not in the isolated thinking self, the cogito of Descartes, but in the spoken, mutual in-between of dialogue. And here is a rare but crucial linguistic detail that is lost in English. Buber's choice of ich du, I thou was a radical, poetic, and spiritual claim. In German, there are two words for you. There is sie, the formal, polite, and distant you, and there is du, the intimate, familiar, and personal thou. Sie is the you of I-it. It's the you use with a shopkeeper, a stranger, or a new boss. It maintains distance. It is an object. But du is the word for lovers, for deep friends, for family, and, significantly, it is the word one uses to address God in prayer. By choosing du, Buber was making a profound statement, all true, real, I-thou encounters, whether with a tree, a cat, or a person, are, by their very nature, sacred. They are all, in their essence, a form of prayer, an intimate, total meeting. He was not just a philosopher, he was a restorer of the sacred to the everyday. To understand how he arrived at this, we must go back, past his academic training, to the very beginning, to a house of scholars, and to a silent, absent mother. To find the roots of this radical, sacred philosophy of dialogue, we must travel back to the source, to the event that shaped Martin Buber's entire emotional and intellectual universe. We must go back to the age of 3, to the moment his mother, Adele, vanished from his life. This act of abandonment was the primal wound, the first and most devastating experience of a thou collapsing into a silent, unexplainable it. A callback to our introduction of this trauma in Section 2. This event was not just a sad biographical detail. It was, for Buber, a philosophical catastrophe. It was the birth of a profound, lifelong loneliness and a desperate quest to understand the nature of true meeting and separation. With his mother gone, he was sent to live with his paternal grandparents in Lemberg, which was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and is today Lviv, in Ukraine. And this move, this transplantation, is everything. He was moved from one world, a world of unexplained, silent, emotional loss, into another, a world of almost overwhelming intellectual presence. His grandfather, Solomon Buber, was not just a well-to-do businessman. This is the central historical fact of his childhood. Solomon Buber was one of the most eminent Jewish scholars of his generation. He was a leading figure in the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, a movement dedicated to combining modern, critical European scholarship with traditional Jewish texts. His home was not just a house, it was a legendary center of learning. It contained a vast, sprawling library filled with rare books, manuscripts, and the constant, buzzing presence of visiting scholars. Young Martin grew up in this library. He was a prodigy, a boy of staggering intellectual gifts, and this library was his true home. While other children were playing, he was breathing the air of textual criticism, philosophy, and history. He was learning to live in a world of ideas. He was being trained at the highest possible level in the world of ayat. He was learning to analyze texts, to categorize history, to master the intellectual world by turning it into an object of study. This, he later said, was his grandfather's world, a world of meaningful ayat. It was a rich, fascinating, and deeply ordered world, but it was a world that had no answer for his deepest, most primal question. No book in that vast library could explain the silence of his mother. No scholarly method could heal the wound of that broken relation. This created the fundamental tension of his life. He lived, by day, as a master of the ayat, a brilliant, analytical scholar, like his grandfather, but he lived, by night, as a lonely child, haunted by the memory of a failed I-thou. And here is a rare linguistic detail about his childhood that illuminates this tension. He grew up in a storm of languages. Lemberg was a multicultural crossroads. At home, with his grandparents, He spoke a precise, literary German. With his father, on visits, he also spoke German. But on the street, with his friends, he spoke Polish. With the scholars in the library, he was expected to read and understand Hebrew and Aramaic, and from the servants and the city's wider Jewish population, he heard the constant, earthy, emotional sounds of Yiddish. This multilingualism wasn't just a skill, it was a state of being. He lived in a constant war of words. He learned, in his very bones, that the same I had to navigate completely different worlds, that how you spoke, and to whom, changed the very nature of reality. It's no wonder he became the philosopher of dialogue. He was a man who, from childhood, had to consciously choose his mode of address, his Grundwort, or primary word, every single day. This led to a specific, formative memory, one that haunted him as much as his mother's absence. He writes that one day, as a very young boy, he was visiting his father's estate. While his father was away, he was tormented by a deep-seated desire to see his mother. A young woman, a housekeeper on the estate, found him brooding. She was a kind, simple, and direct person. She looked at him and said, in a quiet, matter-of-fact way, "No, she will never come back." Buber, the man who would spend his life writing about the power of an encounter, said this was a pivotal moment. The woman did not try to empathize with him that lonely I-it project. She did not lie to him. She did not say, "I know how you feel." She did not try to perspective take. Instead, she met him. She stood with him in his pain and spoke a simple, terrible, and unadorned truth. It was a true, honest, and devastating encounter. It was an I-thou moment built on a terrible it. This collision, the scholarly I-it world of his grandfather's library and the unexplainable, painful I-thou silence of his mother, set him on his path. He could not find his answer in the world of texts. He would have to find it in the world of mystics. But first, he would have to confront the I-it world at its most powerful and logical peak in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. So, Martin Buber, the brilliant, multilingual young man, leaves his grandfather's library in Lemberg. He is a product of its deep I-it scholarship, but he is haunted by the unanswered I-thou silence of his mother. He is a man with a wound, and he goes, as all the great minds of his generation did, to the university to find a cure. He studies in Vienna, in Leipzig, in Berlin. He throws himself into the very heart of fin de siècle German philosophy, art history, and literature. He is a Renaissance man in an age of anxious specialists. But the philosophical air he breathes, the dominant intellectual force of the time, is not a cure. It is, he discovers, the ultimate, most sophisticated, and most lonely expression of his problem. He walks directly into what we can call the Kantian void. To understand Buber, we have to understand what he was reacting against. The philosophy that ruled the German-speaking universities at this time was Neo-Kantianism. This was a powerful revival of the 18th century master, Immanuel Kant, and Kant, for all his genius, had created a magnificent, logical, and terrifyingly lonely prison for the human mind. In simple terms, Kant had tried to solve the problem of how we know anything, and his answer was revolutionary. The mind, he said, is not a passive mirror that just reflects the real world as it is. No, The mind is an active machine. It is a factory. It builds the world we experience. It takes the raw, chaotic, and unknowable data from the outside, what he called the noumenon, or the thing in itself, and it forces it through our built-in mental software. This software includes the fundamental categories of our reality space, time, causality, and so on. The result: the world we see, the phenomenal world, is a construction. It is a product of our own minds. And this leads to the great, unbridgeable, Kantian void, because our mind always processes reality. We can never, not ever, have a direct, unmediated contact with the thing in itself. We can never truly know real reality or a real other person. We are, all of us, trapped in our own skulls, living in a sophisticated 3D simulation that our own brains are running. We are lonely, solitary kings, ruling over a kingdom of our own experiences. For Buber, this was a philosophical nightmare. This was the ultimate cosmic I-it philosophy. The Kantian I is the most solitary I imaginable, a detached, godlike organizer of data. The world and other people are not thous to be met. They are its to be processed. This philosophy was a perfect, logical map of his own loneliness. It told him that the void between him and his absent mother, between his analytical mind and a real, present world, was not a personal trauma. It was an unbreakable, metaphysical fact. This is a key historical fact. Buber was not just a casual student. He was a genuine, first-rate German academic. His early studies were steeped in this tradition. He was wrestling with these men Kant, Nietzsche, Dilthey on their own terms. He was a master of the I-it world, and he could feel it killing his soul. And here is a rare and profound personal detail Buber, in his later autobiographical writings, confessed to a deep, personal crisis during this period. As a student in Vienna, he became obsessed with Kant's idea of infinite time. He describes how he would sit in his room, and the thought of time as a never-ending line, a divider, would fill him with a sense of cosmic shudder. He felt, with a terrifying, physical dread, that this infinite time was a void separating him from all other beings, from all presence. He was experiencing the Kantian void not as a dry academic theory, but as a form of psychological, nihilistic torment. He was, in his own words, at a dead end. He had to find a way out. His grandfather's scholarly I-it was not enough. Kant's philosophical I-it was a prison. He needed something else. He needed a philosophy not of knowing, but of meeting, not of experiencing, but of relating. He was, in short, desperate for a thou. And it was in this state of profound personal and intellectual crisis that he turned away from the cold, pristine, logical systems of German philosophy and stumbled upon a hidden, forgotten, and deeply vibrant tradition. He found his answer not in a lecture hall in Berlin, but in the joyful, ecstatic, and living stories of the Hasidim. Section 8. Fleeing the cold, solitary prison of the Kantian void. Buber was a man desperate for a world of presence. He had found that the peak of Western philosophy, neo-Kantianism, only confirmed his deepest, most primal loneliness, a callback to the void of Section 7. It gave him a perfect map of the I-it world, but no way to escape it. And so, in his late 20s, he made a radical turn. He turned away from the official philosophies of the academy and began to explore the unofficial, mystical, and often despised traditions of his own heritage. He stumbled upon Hasidism. This was not just an academic interest, it was a spiritual and emotional rescue. Hasidism was a mystical revival movement born in the 18th century in Eastern Europe, founded by the figure known as the Baal Shem Tov. It was a rebellion against the dry, overly legalistic, and scholarly Judaism of the time, a Judaism. In fact, much like the one practiced in his own grandfather's library, our callback to Martin Buber's ayat scholarship. His grandfather's world was about analyzing dead texts. The Hasidic world was about encountering a living God. What Buber found in these stories was a complete, embodied answer to the Kantian void, where Kant said, "We are all trapped in our own heads, forever separated from real reality." The Hasidim said the exact opposite. They taught that there is no separation. They taught that God, the Shekinah, or divine presence, is not a distant, abstract it in the sky. God is here, now, in everything. The divine is present in the wood of the table, in the bread you eat, in the song you sing. The entire universe, for the Hasidim, is in a constant, potential I-thou relationship with humanity. With this, for Buber, was an explosion. It meant the I-thou encounter was not a rare, fleeting, philosophical exception. It was the very point of existence. The world was not a process to be analyzed, Kant's I-it. It was a presence to be hallowed. How not through solitary, intellectual contemplation. This was the other key. Hasidism was not an ascetic, lonely mysticism. It was a mysticism of joy, of community, and of ecstasy. The Hasidim prayed by dancing, by singing, by telling stories. They believed that God was best served not with a long face, but with a joyful heart. Their communities were built around the figure of the Tzaddik, or Rebbe. The Rebbe was not a scholar like Buber's grandfather. He was a living bridge, a man who had achieved such a profound, constant I-thou relationship with God that he could help his entire community come into that same relation. He was the master of the encounter. This is the crucial historical fact. Buber was not just a passive reader of Hasidism. He became its primary and most passionate translator to the modern, secular, German-speaking world. His collections of Hasidic tales, like the tales of Rabbi Nachman, 1906, and the legend of the Baal Shem, 1908, were not dry anthropological collections. He retold them. He poured his own poetic, philosophical soul into them, translating their earthy, Yiddish-inflected spirit into a powerful, lyrical, and existentialist German. These books were a sensation. They introduced a whole generation of assimilated, lonely, modern Jews like Franz Kafka, who was a devoted reader to a spiritual home they never knew they had. And here is the rare related detail. This was a profoundly rebellious act. In the enlightened, sophisticated German Jewish circles of Berlin and Vienna, Hasidism was viewed with contempt. It was seen as a primitive, superstitious, ghetto folk religion, full of ecstatic fools. It was the embarrassing, uneducated other that enlightened Jews were trying to escape. For Buber, the brilliant doctoral graduate, to embrace it, to champion it as the true living heart of Judaism, was a radical, countercultural choice. He was, in effect, choosing the living do of the shtetl over the dead as of the Berlin Salon. Hasidism gave Buber his answer. It gave him a lived philosophy, a world where the I-thou was real, communal, and accessible. It cured his intellectual loneliness. He threw himself into this new world, becoming a tzaddik of sorts, himself a speaker, a leader, a source of spiritual guidance for a new generation. He had found his thou in these ancient tales, but he was about to learn, in the most devastating way possible, the profound and tragic difference between knowing the I-thou and living it. He was about to learn the terrible, real-world cost of a failed encounter. Section 9. Martin Buber was now a man who had found his answer, or so he believed. He had escaped the lonely, logical prison of the Kantian void, our callback to Section 7, and found a vibrant, living alternative in the communal, ecstatic joy of Hasidism. He had become the great translator of these stories, a kind of modern, scholarly Rebbe for the disaffected, assimilated, and lonely young intellectuals of German-speaking Europe. He was a master of the I-thou as a concept. He was giving lectures, writing essays, and inspiring a generation with his retrieval of this lost, living mysticism. He was a man who understood the sacred encounter, and it was in this moment of confidence, this moment of perceived spiritual mastery, that his entire world was shattered by a single, real-world, and devastatingly failed encounter. This story is the pivot of Buber's entire life and philosophy. It is the event that transforms him from a mystic and historian of religion into the philosopher of dialogue. It is the event that burns away his ayat understanding of religion and forces him into the terrifying, ethical, and immediate reality of the I-thou. The story, which Buber himself recounted late in his life, took place around 1914, just before the First World War. He was a young, famous professor and writer, and as such, young, seeking, and troubled people were drawn to him, much as they were drawn to the Hasidic Rebbes he wrote about. One day, a young man, a student, came to his home to see him. Buber received him. They sat. The young man, Buber recalled, did not ask any direct questions, but Buber, the expert on the soul, felt he understood the man's unasked, existential questions. He sensed the despair, the searching. Buber was polite. He was kind. He listened, and he answered the unspoken questions with his own, no doubt brilliant, philosophical and spiritual insights. He engaged with the young man's problem, but Buber would later confess with a lifetime of guilt. He was not present. He was not there. His body was in the chair, but his mind, his soul, was preoccupied. And here is the rare and most devastating detail. What was he preoccupied with? Not with the mortgage or a deadline. Buber states he was preoccupied with his own religious work. He was, in that moment, in the middle of a rapturous state of religious ecstasy or inspiration. He was, quite literally, thinking about his I-thou philosophy. He was so busy contemplating the sacred, mystical I-thou concept that he failed to see the real, living, desperate thou who had come to his door. He was, in his own words, not fully there. He was treating the young man as an I-it, a problem to be solved, an interruption to be handled so he could get back to his important spiritual work. He was, in that moment, the perfect Kantian, analyzing a phenomenon from a detached I perspective. He was, in that moment, the lonely empathy expert, analyzing the young man's perspective. I understand your unspoken questions. Instead of meeting him, the young man eventually left. Buber, feeling that the meeting was unsatisfactory, brushed it off and returned to his rapturous work. a few weeks, or perhaps months later, Buber learned the news. That same young man, shortly after their meeting, had killed himself. This news, Buber said, broke him. It was a conversion, but not a conversion to faith. It was a conversion of faith. It was the fatal conversion of the title. He realized, in a moment of agonizing, clarifying guilt, that his entire Hasidic, mystical, I-thou world was a lie. Or rather, it was a beautiful, sophisticated, and ultimately useless I-it game. It was a concept, a story, an idea he was experiencing in his own head. He had been a collector of spiritual butterflies, a man who, like his grandfather, our callback to Section 6, was a master of a meaningful I-it world, in this case, the world of mystical texts, but in the real, non-negotiable world, when a human soul came to him, crying for a meeting. He had failed. He had given the man ideas when the man needed presence. He had given him an analysis when he needed a relation. He realized that the I-thou encounter was not a mystical, ecstatic, rare event that happens when you're reading a holy book. It was an ethical, moment-to-moment demand. It was a responsibility. This is the crucial historical fact. This event is the furnace in which his masterpiece, Ich und Du, I and Thou, was forged. The book, published almost a decade later in 1923, is not, as it is often misread, a happy, mystical text. It is a work of atonement. It is a desperate, passionate, and often pained attempt to explain the life and death difference between the I-it world he had been living in and the I-thou world he had so tragically failed to inhabit. He learned, in the most terrible way possible, that the I-thou is not about perspective taking. It is about presence, and that this presence is not an idea, but a place. It is not in me, and it is not in you. It is, he realized, in the sacred and very real space in between. The fatal conversion, that devastating encounter with the young student who later took his own life, was the event that broke Martin Buber's philosophy in half. It was the end of his career as a mystic and the beginning of his life as a philosopher of dialogue. The guilt of that failed meeting, our callback to Section 9, was an intellectual and spiritual crucible. He had been a man who knew everything about the I-thou as a concept. He was a master of the idea of a sacred encounter, and that mastery, he realized, was not just useless, it was a danger. It was a sophisticated spiritual I-it game that had made him preoccupied and absent when a real, living, human thou was in front of him, crying for presence. This agonizing realization forced Buber to ask a new, more urgent question. He had been asking, what is the I-thou encounter? Now he had to ask, where is it? Where does this sacred, healing, life-affirming relation actually happen? His old answer, the mystical one, was that it happened inside him, in his rapturous, ecstatic state. The student's death proved this was a tragic, lonely, and selfish lie. The encounter was clearly not in him, and it was not in the student. If it had been, they would have remained two separate, lonely worlds. In one of the 20th century's great philosophical breakthroughs, Buber found his answer. He located the I-thou relation, and therefore all true reality, in a new place, not in the subject, the I, as Kant had trapped us, and not in the object, the it. He located it, quite literally, in the space in between them. He gave this space a German name, dazwischen, the in-between. This is the absolute revolutionary core of his entire philosophy. It is his answer to the Kantian void, his answer to the lonely empathy project, and his atonement for his own fatal failure. What is das Zwischen? It is not, as the name might imply, an empty void, a simple separation. For Buber, this in-between is a real, living, and sacred sphere. It is an atmosphere that is created by the meeting of two beings who turn to each other as thou. It is the place where the relationship happens. It is not my feeling, and it is not your feeling. It is the shared reality that our meeting brings into existence. This is his radical, world-changing answer to Kant. The Kantian void, our callback to section 7, had trapped us all inside our own skulls, forever separated from the thing in itself, forever analyzing our own experiences of the world. Buber, with dazwischen, grabs us by the hand and pulls us out. He says, stop looking for reality inside your own head. Stop trying to figure out the world. The real world, the world of presence, is not in you. It is between you and the thou you are addressing. This is also his answer to our modern, lonely empathy project. He tells us to stop trying to place ourselves in another's perspective. That is a violent I-it act. It is my intellect trying to colonize your it. It is a lonely monologue. Buber says, no, do not try to get inside them. Have the courage to stand with them in the in-between. Have the courage to speak and to listen and to build together a shared sacred world. This is a key historical fact. Buber's I and Thou, 1923, was the foundational text of this new dialogical philosophy. But he was not alone. He was part of a larger post-World War I crisis in German Jewish thought. The war had shattered the old 19th century optimism, and thinkers like Buber, Franz Rosenzweig, and others were desperately searching for a new ground for humanity. They found it not in the isolated individual, but in the relationship, the dialogue, and the encounter as the new, fundamental, philosophical starting point. And here is a rare, but essential, technical detail Buber later refined how this in-between space is built. He said it requires an ethical act he called Bestätigung, or confirmation. This is almost always mistranslated as agreement. It is not. Confirmation is the act of affirming the other person in their otherness. It is me, in a dialogue, recognizing you as a legitimate, unique thou, a center of your own world, especially when I disagree with you. It is the opposite of trying to empathize you into a box I understand. It is the active, ethical work of making the other present, of accepting their unique perspective as their own, and in that act of mutual confirmation, the in-between opens up. This in-between is the only true cure for loneliness. Loneliness, in Buber's world, is the state of a person with no zwischen. It is an I that is all I-it, a fortress with no roads leading to it. Connection is the act of creating this in-between space through dialogue and confirmation. This sphere, Buber insisted, is real. It is more real than the solitary I. And to prove just how real and fundamental this meeting was, he told a story, not of a complex human encounter, but of a simple, non-verbal, and profoundly in-between meeting from his own childhood, a meeting with a horse. The sacred, real-world space of the in-between, dazwischen, was Martin Buber's answer to the loneliness of the I-it world. This, he argued, is where all true living happens. But to prove that this meeting was not just a high-level, sophisticated, linguistic, and human-only phenomenon, Buber reached back into his earliest memories. He needed to show that the I-thou encounter is more fundamental than language, more primal than human-to-human empathy. He needed to show that this relation is elemental. He found his perfect example not in a university seminar and not in a human dialogue, but in a stable with a horse. This is one of the most famous and beloved stories from Buber's life. A memory from his childhood around age 10 or 11 while visiting his grandparents' farm. He recounts that, as a boy, he would often sneak away to the stable to visit a particular dapple gray horse. This was not just a child petting an animal. Petting an animal can very easily be an I-it act. The animal is an object of my pleasure, a thing I use to make myself feel good. Buber's encounter was something else entirely. He describes how he would stand with the horse, and a dialogue would begin. This was a dialogue without words, without perspective-taking. A child cannot imagine the perspective of a horse, a callback to our central, lonely empathy problem. It was a dialogue of pure, physical, and mutual presence. He would stroke the horse's neck, and he describes, with a mystic's precision, the feeling of the life under his hands, a living, breathing, other life. But the crucial part was the reciprocity. The horse was not a passive it. The horse would respond. It would lift its head. Its muscles would tense and then relax. Its ears would flick. It was. Buber felt, addressing him. In those moments, standing in the straw-scented air, the in-between dust zwischen opened up. The boy and the horse were no longer a subject I and an object it. They were, for a fleeting, sacred moment, I and thou. Buber says he felt the thou in the horse, and the horse, he was certain, felt the thou in him. It was a mutual confirmation. The horse, in its non-verbal, animal way, confirmed the boy's presence, and the boy confirmed the horse's. There was no analysis, no using, no figuring out. There was only this shared, living, elemental meeting. This is a crucial historical fact. Buber's philosophy, exemplified by this story, was a radical break from centuries of Western thought. Since Descartes, the dominant philosophical tradition had relegated animals to the status of complex machines, or its. They were objects without souls, without minds in the human sense. Buber's I and Thou was one of the first and most powerful 20th century texts to challenge this, becoming a foundational work for modern animal rights philosophy and eco-theology. He was, in essence, re-sacralizing the non-human world, arguing that a relation with a horse or a tree could be just as real and holy as a relation with a human. And here is the rare and critical second half of that story. Buber doesn't just describe the I-thou moment. He describes, with the same precision, how it ended. He explains that this pure, sacred relation continued for some time. But one day, the boy Buber was stroking the horse and he suddenly became aware of it. He became conscious of what fun it was, of what a clever boy he was to be having this special experience. He began to think about the encounter. The moment he did this, the moment he stepped out of the in-between and retreated into his own head to analyze his experience, the magic was gone. "The horse," he said, "felt it." The dialogue stopped. The thou vanished. The horse was once again just an animal in a stable, an object of his experience. This, for Buber, was a perfect, painful lesson in the fall. It is the story of how every thou must, inevitably, become an it. The I-thou world of presence cannot be held. It can only be entered. The moment you try to experience it, to possess it, it is already dead. This pre-verbal primal encounter with the horse was the bedrock of his certainty. It proved that the I-thou was not a high-level, human, intellectual perspective-taking. It was the most basic, fundamental, and real way of being in the world. It was a window. And Buber would argue that all of these windows, the encounter with the horse, with a tree, with a cat, and with a human, are all, in fact, openings onto the same, single, infinite view. They are all, he argued, a glimpse of the eternal thou. Section 12. These fleeting, sacred moments, the encounter with the horse, the true, present meeting with another human, are the heart of Buber's philosophy. They are the only cure for our loneliness. But they are also, by their very nature, transient. As Buber's own story of the horse painfully illustrates our callback to Section 11, the magic always breaks. The I-thou encounter, once we become conscious of it, once we try to analyze or hold it, collapses, the thou vanishes, and we are left, once again, holding a mere it. The horse is just an animal. The person is just a collection of data, age, job, mood. We are tossed back into the lonely, functional, everyday world of I-it. So, is that it? Is life just a long, lonely I-it desert, punctuated by a few, rare, disconnected oases of I-thou? Is this the best we can hope for? Martin Buber looks at this question and gives a profound and world-changing no. He argues that these finite, fleeting I-thou encounters are not disconnected at all. They are not random flashes of light. They are, he insists, related. They are all rays from the same single, central sun. They are all windows or gateways, Gucklucker pointing to the same infinite and ultimate source. Each and every finite thou we meet, the horse, the tree, the stranger, the friend, is a medium, a vessel, a glimpse of the one true and eternal thou. This eternal thou is Buber's name for God, but this is the most radical redefinition of God in modern philosophy. God for Buber is not a supreme being. God is not a king, a judge, or a first cause. To speak of God in this way, as a he or a thing with attributes, is to turn God into the ultimate object. It is to have an I-it relationship with the divine. This, Buber argued, is the dead, lonely God of theology and philosophy. Buber's eternal thou is the exact opposite. God is not an object to be analyzed. God is the absolute presence to be met. God is the thou who, by definition, can never become an it. You cannot figure out God. You cannot use God. You cannot experience God because experience is always in the past. An it. You can only meet God in the sacred, living, and immediate present of an I-thou encounter. And here is the revolutionary conclusion. Every I-thou encounter is a meeting with the eternal thou. When you stand with your whole being and meet the horse, you are meeting the eternal thou through the horse. When you meet another human in the sacred, open, and mutual, in between das Zwischen. You are meeting the eternal thou through that person. This is not a religious idea in the traditional sense. This is a key historical fact. Buber's I and Thou 1923 was a direct spiritual answer to the death of God that his predecessor, Friedrich Nietzsche, had so famously announced. Nietzsche had declared that the old God, the God of dogma, moral law, and metaphysical systems was dead, and Buber, in effect, said, yes, he is, thank God, that God was a barrier. Now, with that idol gone, we are finally free to meet the real God, the eternal thou, not in the sky, but here, in the in-between, in every real relationship we have. And here is a rare, but crucial, distinction Buber made. He drew a sharp line between religion and religiosity. Religion, for Buber, was the I-it world. It was the frozen form of the encounter. It was the dogma, the temples, the laws, the rituals, all the ways that man tries to possess, manage, and control his experience of God. It was, he felt, a barrier to God. But religiosity, religiositet, was the I-thou world. It was the living, breathing, spontaneous, present, and dangerous act of meeting the eternal thou. Buber was a man of profound religiosity who was, his entire life, deeply suspicious of religion. This makes our modern, lonely empathy project a tragedy on a cosmic scale. When we fail to meet the thou in front of us, when we are so busy perspective-taking that we are not present a callback to the fatal conversion of Section 9, we are not just failing to connect with another person. We are, in that same instant, sealing the window. We are failing to meet the divine. Our lonely, I-it world has locked us out of both human and divine presence. Buber's life was a testament to this lived religiosity. His philosophy was not a solitary academic exercise. It was forged in dialogue, and his most important, most profound, and most defining human I-thou encounter was the one he shared with his closest friend, his greatest collaborator, and his most cherished thou, the philosopher Franz Rosenzweig. Martin Buber's philosophy, forged in the tragic failure of the fatal conversion, our callback to Section 9, was a desperate, ethical plea for a life lived in dialogue. He had shown that all real living happens in the sacred, shared space in between das Zwischen, and that every finite thou is a window to the eternal thou. But this philosophy, as beautiful as it was, could have remained a lonely theory. It needed a thou. It needed a real, living human partner to confirm it, to bring it from an I-it idea into a lived I-thou reality. Buber found this partner. He found his most important, challenging, and profound thou in the philosopher Franz Rosenzweig. Their friendship is one of the 20th century's great intellectual and spiritual love stories. It was not a simple, agreeable partnership. It was a holy wrestling, a perfect embodiment of Buber's confirmation of the other. Rosenzweig was a brilliant, younger philosopher, a man who had, on a parallel track, come to the exact same conclusions as Buber. Like Buber, he had been a master of the German I-it philosophical tradition, a student of Hegel and Kant, and, like Buber, he had found it to be a cold, lonely, and dead system. And here is a rare and astonishing detail that proves their parallel lives. Rosenzweig's conversion came not in a quiet study, but in the trenches of World War I, While serving as a German soldier on the Balkan front, surrounded by the industrial slaughter of modern warfare, he had a life-changing epiphany. He began to write his own masterpiece, The Star of Redemption, and he wrote it, not in a leather-bound journal, but on postcards that he mailed back, page by page, to his mother. This was a philosophy, like Buber's, born of absolute life and death crisis. It was a philosophy that rejected the lonely, abstract I of Kant and argued that all real philosophy must begin from the fact of dialogue, of revelation, of the meeting between I and thou. When these two men met after the war, it was an explosive, fated encounter. It was not just two eyes agreeing. It was the creation of a we, a Das Zwischen so powerful and productive that it changed the course of Jewish history. They were not just friends, they were collaborators. This is the crucial historical fact in 1920 in Frankfurt. Buber and Rosenzweig co-founded the Freies Jüdisches Lehrhaus, the Free Jewish House of Learning. This was not a school in the traditional sense. It was a revolutionary anti-university. The German university system was the ultimate I-it world. A professor god, the Herr Professor Doctor, stood at a podium and lectured a monologue to a passive, note-taking audience, the its. The Lehrhaus was designed to be the opposite. It was a university of pure I-thou. There were no lectures, only dialogues. There were no subjects, only texts. The central idea, which Rosenzweig famously articulated, was learning from books to life. People professors, shopkeepers, artists, atheists, and rabbis would come together, sit around a table, and wrestle with a text, the Hebrew Bible, a philosophical tract, a poem. The text was the third point of the thou, the thing that allowed the group to enter into a true, mutual, and in-between dialogue. It was the workers' theater for the soul, a callback to Camus' project. But in Buber's world, it was Buber's philosophy, weaponized as an institution. This partnership was Buber's personal redemption. After the tragedy of failing the young student, this friendship with Rosenzweig was a living, breathing, successful encounter. It was a bond built on confirmation. They argued fiercely. They disagreed on theology, on mysticism, on politics. Buber was the poetic, mystical artist. Rosenzweig was the rigorous, systematic, legal-minded thinker. But they never sought to change the other, to perspective take the other into their own box. They confirmed each other's otherness, and in that holy shared space in between, they created their greatest and most monumental collaborative work, a new, radical, and world-changing translation of the Hebrew Bible. The profound friendship between Martin Buber and Franz Rosenzweig was not just a personal bond, it was a workshop. Their Lehrhaus, our callback to Section 13, was a living, breathing laboratory for I-thou dialogue. But this collaboration was about to produce its greatest and most monumental work. In 1925, they were approached by a German publisher with a seemingly conventional I-it project to create a new, modern German translation of the Hebrew Bible. For Buber and Rosenzweig, this task was not a literary or scholarly exercise. It was, they decided, the ultimate test of their entire philosophy. It would be their attempt to have a direct, living I-thou encounter with the eternal thou, our callback to Section 12 as it was spoken in the text. This was a radical, almost impossible goal, the Bible that most Germans knew. Martin Luther's beautiful and powerful translation from the 16th century was, in their view, an I-it masterpiece. Luther had taken the rough Hebrew and tamed it. He had forced it into elegant, smooth, proper German. He had made it make sense to a German Christian audience. He had, in Buber's terms, turned the thou of the text into a familiar, domesticated it. He had colonized the text with his own perspective. Buber and Rosenzweig decided to do the exact opposite. Their goal was not to bring the Bible to the reader. Their goal was to bring the reader to the Bible. They wanted to force the German-speaking reader, who was used to the smooth, I-it world of modern language, to have a direct, unmediated, and often shocking I-thou encounter with the original Hebrew. This is the crucial historical fact. This project, which would become known as the Buber-Rosenzweig Bible, began in 1925. It would become a monumental, life-defining task for both men. But it was almost immediately struck by profound tragedy. In 1922, just as their collaboration was deepening, Franz Rosenzweig was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. He was a man at the absolute peak of his genius, who was now trapped inside a body that was slowly, but completely, failing him. And here is the rare and profoundly moving detail of their method. Rosenzweig's illness progressed with terrifying speed. Soon, he was completely paralyzed. He could not move, speak, or write. He could only communicate by blinking his eyelids, a system his dedicated wife, Edith, would translate. This is how they did the work. Buber would sit with his thou, his friend, who was now a living text of pure presence and suffering. Buber would propose a translation for a line of Hebrew, and Rosenzweig, the paralyzed thou, would blink his corrections, his arguments, his insights. It was a dialogue, das Zwischen, made real and holy in the most extreme of circumstances. Their translation method was a perfect mirror of this encounter. To preserve the thou-ness of the Hebrew, they shattered German grammar. They refused to translate names like God with a single, easy, I-it word. They translated based on root verbs. They wanted to capture the spokenness, the breath, the stumble of the original, oral text. The result was a German that was strange, harsh, and utterly new. It forced the reader to stop reading an I-it act and start listening an I-thou act. They were trying to make the sound of the eternal thou audible. This was not a translation in any normal sense. It was a dialogue. Buber and Rosenzweig were confirming the otherness of the Hebrew text, not empathizing it into their own language. And in the tragic, sacred space in between, das Zwischen, between the healthy Buber and the paralyzed Rosenzweig, they created a work that was more than a book. It was a testament to a lived relation. Rosenzweig died in 1929. Buber, in a profound act of love and fidelity, continued the work alone for the next 30 years, finally completing it in 1961. He was, until the end, still in dialogue with his lost thou. This sacred work, however, was being done in a world that was rapidly falling into the darkest I-it imaginable. Section 15. This monumental 30-year translation project, a quiet, sacred dialogue between Buber and his lost friend Rosenzweig. Our callback to Section 14 was an act of profound I-thou fidelity. But this sacred, in-between space of texts and memory was being built in a world that was collapsing into the most total and most murderous I-it regime in human history. In January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, the Kantian void. Our callback to Section 7 was no longer just a lonely philosophical problem. It had become a state-sanctioned, genocidal policy. The Nazi worldview was, for Buber, the ultimate demonic expression of the I-it. It was a system built entirely on the principle of objectification. It took an entire class of human beings, Jews, but also Roma, homosexuals, and political dissidents, and, with the cold, bureaucratic precision of an I-it scientist, it turned them into its. They were no longer thous to be met. They were a problem to be solved. They were vermin, data, objects to be categorized, legislated against, and, ultimately, used and exterminated. It was a world in which das Zwischen, the sacred in-between space of dialogue, was systematically hunted and destroyed. In this new, terrifying reality, Buber's work changed. His I-thou philosophy was no longer a spiritual, poetic, or academic preference. It became an act of spiritual day-to-day resistance. This is a crucial and often misunderstood historical fact. Buber did not flee Germany in 1933. He stayed. He had only just been given his first and only full professorship at the University of Frankfurt in 1930, a late career honor. The Nazis immediately banned him from teaching German students. He was purged, along with all other Jewish academics, from the German I-it university system. So, what did he do? He turned all his energy to the one institution he had built that was designed for this very crisis, the Frankfurt Lehrhaus. Our callback to Section 13. The Lehrhaus, which he and Rosenzweig had founded as a dialogical anti-university, now became a spiritual lifeboat. It became the only place in Germany where Jewish learning, Jewish dialogue, and Jewish confirmation could happen. It was no longer a gentle humanist project. It was a desperate, essential act of survival. And here is the rare, heroic, and deeply moving detail of his life during this period. Buber was not just a director in an office. He became a tzaddik, a Hasidic rebbe, a callback to Section 8 for a dying world. From 1933 to 1938, he traveled tirelessly all over Nazi Germany. He went from town to town, speaking in packed, hidden-away synagogue basements, in private homes, in any in-between space they could find. The Gestapo watched him. He was interrogated. He was banned and rebanned from public speaking. He was not, in these secret meetings, teaching philosophy. He was teaching courage. He was, in the most direct, life or death way, enacting his philosophy. In a world that screamed at German Jews, "You are a meaningless it." Buber stood before them and, with his whole being, addressed them. He confirmed them as a thou. He told them, "You are a people. You have a history. You have a God. You are a we." He was, quite literally, creating a sacred das Zwischen in the heart of the machine, a defiant we that stood against the murderous they. This was, perhaps, the purest, most heroic expression of his entire philosophy. It was the fatal conversion, Section 9, redeemed. He was no longer the preoccupied mystic. He was the present thou, risking his own life to meet the thou of his people. But this ghetto of the spirit, as it was called, could not last. In 1938, with the threat of arrest becoming an imminent certainty, just months before the Kristallnacht pogrom, would shatter the last illusions of safety. Buber and his wife finally fled. He left the it of Germany and escaped to a new and deeply complex thou, the land of Palestine. He was going to Jerusalem. So, in 1938, Martin Buber, now 60 years old, fled the most total I-it state imaginable, Nazi Germany. He was a refugee, a man who had stayed, like a captain, with his spiritual lifeboat, the Lehrhaus. Our callback to section 15 until the last possible moment. He arrived in Palestine, a land that, for centuries, had been the eternal thou of Jewish prayer, the ultimate idea of return. But Buber, the great philosopher of presence, was not arriving in an idea. He was arriving in a real, complex, and deeply troubled place, and he would soon discover that he had, once again, traded one form of loneliness for another. He was not, as one might imagine, welcomed as a returning hero. This is a crucial historical fact. He was given a position, a professorship in social philosophy, at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, but to the dominant, hard-nosed, secular, and socialist nationalist Yishuv, the pre-state Jewish community. Buber was an object of deep suspicion. He was a German. He was a philosopher. He was a mystic, thanks to his Hasidic work, a callback to Section 8. In a community of tough-minded pioneers who were focused on the I-it work of building roads, draining swamps, and securing land, Buber and his I-thou philosophy of dialogue were seen as soft, naive, and dangerously un-Zionist. Buber, in short, had fled the German I-it of racial purity, only to find himself confronting a new and deeply painful I-it problem, the rise of an inward-looking and increasingly militant Jewish nationalism. The central question of Palestine was the Arab-Jewish relationship. The land was not an empty thou, it was a home to another people, the Palestinian Arabs, and Buber, with his fatal conversion, Section 9 burned into his soul, knew he had one moral choice. He could not, and would not, treat the Arab population as a mere it, an obstacle, a problem, a demographic to be managed or transferred. They were a thou, a living, present people who must be met. This was not a popular position. It was, in fact, politically toxic. Buber immediately began to speak, write, and agitate for a path that almost no one wanted. And here is the rare and tragically overlooked detail. Just 1 year after his arrival, in 1939, Buber gave a now famous speech, The Anointed, at the Hebrew University. It was supposed to be a scholarly lecture on Messianism. Instead, it was a profound ethical warning. He argued that to believe that we, the Jewish people, are the chosen, and that the other people, the Arabs, are not, is a monstrous I-it perversion of faith. He argued that true chosenness means being chosen for the responsibility of creating true I-thou dialogue with the other. He was, in effect, telling his new, desperate and traumatized community that their survival depended on their ability to have an I-thou encounter with their Arab neighbors. He was telling them that the eternal thou Section 12 was present not in their nationalist ambitions, but in the sacred, in between, das zwischen Section 10 that they must build with the Arabs. The backlash was immediate. He was labeled a traitor, an assimilationist, the worst insult in the Zionist vocabulary, a naive fool who didn't understand the reality on the ground. But Buber had to. His entire life was a preparation for this lonely stance. He, along with a small group of like-minded outsiders, founded a political group called Ichud Unity. This was the Lair House made political. Its goal: not a Jewish state that would rule over an Arab minority, an ayat state, but a binational state, a true we, where two peoples would live with each other as equal thous. It was, of course, a political failure. History was not on his side. But for Buber, it was not about winning. It was about being. He was redeeming his failure with the young student. He was proving that the I-thou was not a rapturous mystical idea, but a grim, non-negotiable, and now political ethical demand. This lonely, unrealistic stance put him in direct conflict with his old friend, the man who had been the other great collector of Jewish mystical tales, Gershom Scholem. Section 17. Martin Buber's arrival in Jerusalem had made him a political stranger, a man branded as naive and traitorous for his unpopular I-thou insistence on a binational state with the Arabs, our callback to Section 16. This political loneliness, however, was mirrored and, in some ways, surpassed by a profound intellectual loneliness. He had fled the I-it world of Nazi Germany, only to find himself in a new, more intimate, and more painful academic battle. This was the great, lifelong, and often fiery public argument he had with his friend and greatest intellectual rival, Gershom Scholem. If Buber was the great poet and reteller of Jewish mysticism, Scholem was its great scientist and historian. They were the two giants of 20th century Jewish thought, both professors at the Hebrew University, both German Jewish exiles, both obsessed with the mystical traditions that the 19th century ayat scholars like Buber's own grandfather, a callback to Section 6, had dismissed as embarrassing. They were, in short, natural allies who became perfect, necessary, and often brutal antagonists. The root of their conflict was the very heart of Buber's philosophy. It was a battle for the soul of mysticism. It was the I-it versus the I-thou in the realm of scholarship. Scholem was the ultimate I-it master. He was a historian in the purest, most demanding German tradition. He believed that mysticism, specifically the Kabbalah, his great subject was a historical, textual, and philological problem to be solved. He wanted to know, with objective, scientific, I-it precision, what a text really said, who really wrote it, and what it really meant in its original context. For Scholem, empathizing with the text, that lonely I-it projection was a sin. The scholar's job was to be a detached, objective analyst. Buber, of course, was the I-thou reteller. He had, since his fatal conversion, Section 9, rejected this entire I-it project as a dead, lonely-making game. He believed that the point of the Hasidic tales, his chosen subject, a callback to Section 8, was not their I-it historical accuracy. Their point was their power, right now, to create an I-thou encounter, to open a window to the eternal thou. He didn't care what really happened. He cared about the living truth of the story, its power to speak to a modern, lonely soul. This is the crucial historical fact. This difference erupted into a famous, lifelong, and scathing mysticism debate. Scholem, the I-it scientist, launched a series of public academic attacks on Buber, the I-thou poet, in essays like Martin Buber's Hasidism. Scholem accused Buber of being, in essence, a wonderful poet, but a terrible scholar. He accused him of projecting his own 20th century existentialist I-thou philosophy onto the 18th century Hasidim. He claimed that Buber's Hasidism had nothing to do with the real historical Hasidim, who were in Skolem's view often complex, dark, and not at all the gentle I-thou hippies Buber made them out to be. And here is the rare and deeply ironic detail: Scholem was, in a sense, right. Buber was a bad historian by Scholem's Ayat standards, but Buber's entire philosophy was a rejection of those standards. His defense was, "Of course, you are missing the point." Buber was not describing a dead it. He was evoking a living thou. He was, as he had been since the Lehrhaus Section 13, learning from books to life. This argument, however, was not just an abstract academic spat. It was personal. It was two friends, two exiles, two old men arguing in the small, incestuous, intellectual ghetto of Jerusalem. It was a perfect and painful Das zwischen Section 10. They were, in their own way, confirming each other with every holy argument. But it was also profoundly isolating for Buber, because in the academic world, the I-it won. Scholem's historical philological method became the gold standard, the definition of modern Jewish studies. Buber's I-thou approach was respectfully sidelined as philosophy or theology. Buber was, once again, made an outsider in his own home. He was too mystical for the politicians and too unscholarly for the scholars. He was a lonely thou-sayer in a world that was demanding, with increasing violence, a choice between ayat solutions. This was his final, painful, political and intellectual ridge. Section 18. So, Martin Buber, the great philosopher of the I-thou, found himself a profound outsider in his new home. He was an outsider to the hard-nosed politicians of the Yishuv, the pre-state Jewish community, and he was an outsider to the dominant I-it academic historians at his own university. Like Gershom Scholem, our callback to Section 17. He was a man of dialogue in a world that was rapidly and violently closing all the doors to it. His I-thou philosophy, which had been forged in the spiritual plague of post-World War I Europe, was now being put to the ultimate and most tragic real-world test. This test was the Arab-Jewish conflict. And for Buber, this was not a political problem. It was a human and theological crisis. He saw his fellow Zionists in their desperate and historically understandable hunger for a safe haven after centuries of ayat objectification in Europe, falling into the very same trap. He saw them beginning to treat the land of Palestine as an it, a thing to be redeemed and possessed, and, most tragically, to treat the Arab population as a mere it. The Arabs were the demographic problem, the obstacle, the thing to be managed, transferred, or dealt with. For Buber, this was a moral catastrophe. It was the fatal conversion, our callback to Section 9 on a national scale. He would not be preoccupied with the religious or national project of his own people, and in doing so, fail to meet the living, present thou who was standing right in front of him. His entire life, from the trauma of his mother's abandonment, Section 6, to the guilt of the student's suicide, had been a training for this very moment. He had to be present. He had to confirm the other. This is the crucial historical fact Buber, along with a small circle of other German Jewish intellectuals and humanists like Judah Magnus, the chancellor of Hebrew University, became the most prominent voice for a solution that was, to the mainstream, political poison. He became the leader of the Ichud Unity Association. This group was the political embodiment of his Lehrhaus Section 13. Its goal was to create a true Das zwischen Section 10 in the Holy Land. They argued, with a desperate moral passion, against the Ayat solution of a Jewish state that would, by necessity, have to rule over a large Arab it. Instead, Ichud fought for a binational state, a single, federated nation where both Jews and Arabs would live as equal thous, two we's building a shared home. This was not empathy. Buber was not engaged in the lonely I-it project of seeing from an Arab perspective. He was doing something far more radical. He was confirming them. He was, in the face of his own people's fear and trauma, insisting that the eternal thou Section 12 could only be found in the sacred, in-between space that they must build with their Arab neighbors. To build a state without this, he warned, would be to build a state on a foundation of I-it, a state that would be safe but spiritually hollow, a state that would have won the land but lost its soul. And here is the rare and devastating. Detail Buber's lonely peace was not just a political position, it was a personal one. He actively sought out I-thou encounters. He became a founding member of the League for Jewish Arab Rapprochement. He had deep, personal, and respectful friendships with Arab intellectuals, at a time when such dialogue was seen as naive at best and treasonous at worst. He was, in the most literal way, trying to be the in-between space. The result, of course, was failure. Total, historical failure. The 1948 War of Independence, or the Nakba, as the Arabs call it, was the I-it solution winning in the most complete, violent, and non-negotiable way. The binational state, Buber's I-thou dream, was not just defeated, it was rendered absurd, childish, and obsolete. The State of Israel was born, and it was born, as he had feared, in a triumph of I-it power and in the tragedy of a failed thou encounter, the creation of the Palestinian refugee crisis. Buber was now, more than ever, a stranger. He was an internal exile in the very state he had, in his own way, helped to build. He was a citizen of a nation that had rejected his most fundamental ethical warning. This was his final, most profound loneliness. He was the prophet of dialogue in a land of walls, the man of peace in a land of war. He was respected now as an elder statesman, a grand old man, which is the I-it label society gives to a prophet it wishes to honor without having to listen to. He was a man forced to live until his dying day, on the most painful, narrow ridge of all. So, Martin Buber lived out his final decades in Jerusalem, a figure of global respect and profound local loneliness. He was the grand old man of humanism, nominated multiple times for the Nobel Peace Prize, a man whose philosophy of I-thou was a balm to a post-Holocaust world. But in his own home, in the land of Israel, he was a political stranger, a man whose lonely peace project his call for a binational state. Our callback to Section 18 had been rendered obsolete by the I-it realities of war and nationalism. He was a living, breathing paradox, the prophet of dialogue in a land of walls. How does a man live in such a state? How does one be an I-thou person in an I-it world that has, in every measurable way, one Buber, in his later writings, gave this state of being a name? It is his final and most enduring metaphor. He called it living on the narrow ridge. This is the ultimate, practical summary of his entire hard-won philosophy. The narrow ridge is the path of the I-thou life. It is a path of holy insecurity, a razor's edge, and on either side of it is a great, terrifying abyss. On one side is the abyss of the individualistic I-it. This is the world of Kant, of modern loneliness, of the empathy project, our callback to section 1. It is the world of the solitary I who sees everything else as an it to be experienced, used, or figured out. It is a world of pure, selfish individualism. On the other side is the other, and equally dangerous, abyss the collective I-it. This is the world of isms. This is nationalism, fascism, dogmatic communism, or any rigid, abstract religion, a callback to section 12. This is the world where the thou of the individual is sacrificed to a greater, abstract it, the state, the party, the people, the cause. This is the world that says, your I-thou encounter with your Arab neighbor is irrelevant because the it of national security demands we treat them as an object. Buber's narrow ridge is the path that runs, with terrifying difficulty, between these two abysses. It is the path of das Zwischen, the in-between, section 10. It is the life of the person who refuses to be just an I and refuses to be dissolved into an it. It is the life of dialogue. This is a key historical fact. Buber, in his old age, became a prophet in the true biblical sense. Not a man who predicts the future, but a man who speaks a truth from the narrow ridge to the people in the I-it abyss. He spent the 1950s and 60s doing exactly this. He publicly argued with Israel's I-it founding fathers, like David Ben-Gurion. He wrote essays, gave speeches, and accepted awards like the 1953 Peace Prize of the German book trade, a hugely controversial act of I-thou dialogue with the German people that forced his own people to confront the thou of their enemy. He was living on the narrow ridge, a lonely, often vilified, but present man. And here is the rare and beautiful detail of the metaphor's origin. The narrow ridge was not his invention. It was, like all his best ideas, a dialogue he was borrowing from and reinterpreting a famous Hasidic teaching from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the very rabbi he had translated as a young man. A callback to section 8. The original Hasidic saying is, all the world is a very narrow bridge, gesher tzar mi'ad, and the main thing is not to be afraid. Buber, the 20th century realist who had seen the Holocaust, changed this. His narrow ridge is not a place where one is not afraid. It is a place of profound fear. It is the place of holy insecurity. To live in dialogue, to reject the safe and easy I-it answers of nationalism or pure individualism, is a terrifying choice. But his point is the same as the Rebbe's. It is the only way across. It is the only path that is not an abyss. It is the only way to live a human life. His life's work, then, was to show us that our loneliness is not a problem to be solved, but a call to this ridge. So, we return to our original and most modern question. Can human beings truly place themselves in another person's perspective? We have traveled with Martin Buber from his grandfather's I-it library, section 6, to the I-thou joy of the Hasidim section I-8, through the cold, lonely, Kantian void section 7, and to the terrible, fatal conversion, section 9, that taught him the cost of a failed meeting. We have stood with him on the narrow ridge, section 19 of his political and intellectual exile in Jerusalem. And now, at the end of this journey, we can hear his answer. His answer to our question is a clear, definitive, and liberating. No, no, you cannot. And, he would insist, you should not even try. The very question itself, he would say, is the signature of our lonely, modern, it sickness. The entire project of perspective-taking, of walking a mile in their shoes, of empathy as an act of Einfühlung or feeling into, our callback to section 1, is a trap. It is a solitary, intellectual, and arrogant act. It is the I of the Kantian prison, sitting alone in its skull, experiencing the other. It is the I treating the other person as a fascinating, complex, and tragic object. It is my mind, my imagination, my analysis, trying to colonize your thou and turn it into an it that I can understand, figure out, and solve. This is the very preoccupation that led to Buber's greatest failure. He was so busy empathizing with his students' unspoken I-it problem that he failed, fatally, to meet the living, present, I-thou person. We are so obsessed with understanding an I-it verb that we have forgotten how to stand with an I-thou stance. Buber's philosophy is not a no to connection. It is a no to our flawed method. He offers a yes that is infinitely more profound, more terrifying, and more real. He does not offer a new technique for empathy. He demands a new way of being. His answer is not perspective, but presence. The goal is not to see as another. The goal is to stand with them. The goal is not to get inside their head. That is a violent, lonely fantasy. The goal is to stand in the in-between with them, in the sacred, shared, and very real world of Das Zwischen section 10. You do not connect by simulating the other. You connect by confirming the other. You make them present in their total, unanalyzable, and often disagreeable otherness. This is the lesson of the horse section 11. A boy cannot take the perspective of a horse, but he can, with his whole being, meet the horse in a dialogue of pure mutual nonverbal presence. This is the lesson of the Lehrhaus section 13. The point is not for one student to win the argument by understanding the other's flawed perspective. The point is for both to be changed by the shared in-between encounter with the text. This is the life of the narrow ridge. It is the holy insecurity of leaving the I-it safety of your own perspective and risking a real meeting. It is a life of yes to the person and no to the abstraction. Here is a rare and final detail of his life. In 1958, his wife, Paula, died. She had been his thou for almost 60 years. She was a writer herself, who had converted to Judaism and been his silent, intellectual partner. Buber was plunged into a profound I-it desolation. His world was derealized. His eternal thou, section 12, was hidden. And yet, he did not retreat. He did not become a lonely it. He continued to live the dialogue. He received students. He wrote. He spoke. He proved that the I-thou is not a feeling of happiness. It is an ethical stance of presence, a fidelity to the in-between. a stance you hold even from the heart of your own deepest grief. This is the final historical fact. Martin Buber died at his home in Jerusalem on June 13, 1965, and his funeral was the one brief, shining moment that his Etude group Section 18 had always dreamed of. The ayat walls of politics fell. At his graveside, a strange, impossible Dazwischen was created, his bitterest intellectual rival. Gershom Scholem, Section 17, stood and wept. The ayat politicians of the Israeli state stood next to Arab leaders and Christian priests. For a few brief hours, in the shared in-between space left by this one man's life, all his enemies and friends were gathered, not as perspectives to be understood, but as a single thou of a grieving community. Buber's answer, then, is a demand. Stop trying to be a lonely empath in your head. It is a failed and lonely I-it game. Have the courage, instead, to be a person. Have the courage to be present. The cure for loneliness is not a better simulation. It is the simple, terrifying, and sacred meeting of your whole being with theirs. Word count 1060. Wind down begins. And so, our own encounter with this quiet, powerful man comes to its close. We have walked with him out of the lonely modern world of perspective, out of the safe and sterile I-it of our own minds. He has asked us to stop analyzing and to start meeting. He has asked us to have the courage to leave the I and to seek the thou. He has shown us that all real living is not in the self, but in the in-between. That Dazwischen, that sacred, shared, and fragile space, is the only home we have. He has placed us on the narrow ridge, a place of holy insecurity, a place where we are, perhaps, afraid, but where we are, at last, together. He does not solve our loneliness. He hallows it. He shows us that the ache we feel is not a sickness. It is a homesickness for the thou we have not yet had the courage to meet. He does not ask us to feel into the other. He asks us, simply, to be present, to confirm, and to be confirmed, to stand with our whole being, and to speak that first and final and most holy primary word, thou. Word count 300, end of script. Sweet dreams.